You ever get that feeling when you're home alone and suddenly the silence feels too quiet, like the shadows are watching, like something is just behind the wall? These are the stories of people who ignored that feeling and almost didn't make it out. Lock your doors. Turn the lights low. These are terrifying true stories from people who were home alone. I grew up in a pretty quiet suburb in Pennsylvania. Our house wasn't creepy by any means, at least not until that night. It was winter, mid-January, and both my parents had gone out of town to visit my grandmother. I was 17, just old enough to stay home alone for the weekend. They left on a Friday afternoon and wouldn't be back until late Sunday. I had plans to binge some movies, order pizza, and enjoy having the house to myself. The first night was fine. I stayed up late watching horror movies, ironically. I wasn't scared, I'd grown up watching them, but something about the silence of that night kept me a little more alert than usual. You know how the quiet gets too quiet when you're home alone? By 2:30 a.m., I turned everything off and headed to bed. I remember clearly, my phone was at 12%, so I plugged it in next to my bed and set my alarm for noon. Then, somewhere around 3:15 a.m., I woke up. Not from a nightmare, just awake. It was freezing. I thought maybe I had left a window open, but everything was shut tight. That wasn't what bothered me, though. What bothered me was the sound. It was faint, a sort of scratching noise. At first I thought it was the wind, but it was steady, too steady. It was coming from below, right beneath my room, the basement. I live in a split-level home. My bedroom's above the basement, which we mostly use for storage and laundry. No one ever hangs out down there, but this sound, it was like something clawing at concrete, slow, dragging. I froze in bed trying to tell myself it was just the furnace or maybe a raccoon that somehow got in. But the longer I lay there, the more rhythmic it became, almost like breathing, deep, heavy breathing echoing from beneath the floorboards. I finally built up the courage to get out of bed. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want to announce myself. I crept through the dark hallway, down the stairs toward the basement door. The air got colder as I moved, unnaturally cold. I stood in front of the basement door and listened. The sound had stopped. But something felt wrong. The kind of wrong that makes the hair on your neck stand up. The kind of wrong your instincts scream at you to walk away from. But curiosity won. I slowly opened the basement door. It was pitch black down there, blacker than it should have been. The light switch was at the top of the stairs, so I flicked it. Nothing. Dead. That light has never gone out before. It worked just fine earlier that evening. I even remember flipping it on when I got soda from the fridge down there. Now, nothing. I grabbed my phone from my pocket to use the flashlight, but of course it had barely 3% left. It flickered on for a few seconds, just enough to show the first few steps, before dying completely. Now I had a decision: close the door and pretend nothing happened, or go down there. I told myself I had to check it out. If some animal was down there, I didn't want it tearing things up. And if it was something worse, I opened the basement door all the way. The stairs creaked as I descended. With each step I could feel the air get heavier, denser, and then halfway down I heard it again. The breathing, but this time it wasn't below me. It was to my left, right near the laundry room. The kind of breathing that didn't sound quite human. It was wet, raspy, and uneven, like someone gasping through water. I froze. My foot stopped mid-step. My body wouldn't move. I stood there in the dark, hearing it breathe, until something shuffled closer, a dragging noise. I turned around and bolted back up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and locked it. And then, bang, something slammed against the other side of the door, once, then again, harder. I backed away, heart pounding, hands shaking. I didn't know whether to call the police or what to even say. There's something in my basement? They'd laugh or think I was high. I grabbed the kitchen knife and stood there, watching that door for what felt like an hour, but it didn't slam again. Eventually, I tiptoed back into my room, locking my door and staying awake until daylight. When morning finally came, I opened the basement door again. Sunlight poured through the narrow window down there. Everything looked normal, no sign of forced entry, no mess, no animal. Except one thing. On the inside of the basement door there were scratches, dozens of them, like something had been clawing upward from the inside of the basement trying to get through. I called my parents and lied. Told them I thought I heard an animal in the basement. My dad checked it out when he got home. He said the breaker must have flipped, which is why the light didn't work. But he couldn't explain the scratches, and I never stayed home alone again. This happened back in 2014, when I had just moved into a small one-bedroom apartment outside of Denver, Colorado. I was 23, single, and working night shifts at a nearby night. I had the day off. It was a Wednesday, and I remember because I was supposed to do laundry but got lazy and decided to just chill instead. I stayed up watching Netflix, scrolling through my phone and messing around with music until about 1:30 a.m. My apartment was on the second floor, facing a small alley that led behind the building. I always kept the windows locked. I was paranoid like that, even back then. The building was old, but not creepy, just quiet, which made what happened that night the other room, the living room. I turned off the water, toothbrush still in hand, and stepped out into the hallway. At first, everything looked normal. The soft glow from the kitchen light spilled just far enough to illuminate the corner of the living room. But then I saw it. One of my windows, the left one by the couch, was open about 4 inches. I froze. That window was always locked. I knew it was locked. I had even double-checked it that evening before closing the blinds. A sharp chill ran up my spine. Not from the cold air, but from something else. That deep, primal awareness that something wasn't right. I approached the window slowly. My apartment was on the second floor. No balcony, no fire escape. No way someone could have reached it from the outside, unless they had a ladder or climbed the drain pipe. But why? Why my window? I reached for it to shut it, and that's when I noticed something even worse. Right there, on the inside of the windowsill, were wet fingerprints. Not mine. Much larger. Fresh. As if someone had just touched it from the inside and backed away. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My eyes scanned the living room. Everything looked untouched. The couch, the coffee table, the TV. But in the shadows behind my curtains, I thought I saw movement. A shape. I backed into the hallway, heart pounding. I grabbed the nearest object I could find, a ceramic mug, and dialed 911 with my other hand. I told them someone had broken into my apartment. While I waited, I locked myself in the bathroom, sitting on the floor with my back against the door. I turned off the lights and just listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing. Not even the creak of a floorboard. It was almost too quiet. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, I heard a knock. Police! I came out and let them in. 2 officers swept the place top to bottom. There was no one there. No signs of forced entry except that open window. The fingerprints had already started to fade, like condensation. The officers told me it was probably nothing. Maybe I left the window cracked and didn't notice. I know I didn't. I asked about security footage. They said the building didn't have cameras facing that side, just the front lobby. They told me to lock the window and call again if anything else happened. I didn't sleep that night, but I did stay up, holding a kitchen knife, every light in the apartment on, staring at that window until the sun came up. The next day, I bought a camera and pointed it straight at that side of the room. For weeks, nothing happened. Until one morning, while reviewing a motion alert on my phone from around 2:15 a.m., I saw a man's face. Just for a split second, lit by the reflection from the microwave clock. Standing inside my apartment, facing the camera, smiling. The frame glitched. Then he was gone. There was no sign of entry, no broken lock, no disturbed furniture. But I moved out 2 days later. This happened to my younger cousin Ben when he was 17. He was home alone one night while his parents were out at a dinner party across town. It was supposed to be a quiet, uneventful Friday. But what happened still gives him nightmares, and I was there when he told me the story, shaking, eyes locked on the floor like he didn't want to see it play out in his head again. Ben lived in a modest 2-story home in Oregon, in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other, and crime was virtually non-existent. He had been watching YouTube in his room upstairs when he heard the first knock. It was soft. Not on the front door, but on the back sliding glass door, the one that led into their small, fenced backyard. Ben paused the video and listened. It came again. Knock, knock, knock. 3 distinct taps, rhythmic, deliberate. He got up and went downstairs. The back door was hidden behind a curtain that opened up to the kitchen. At first, he thought maybe his parents forgot their keys, but when he peeked out through the side of the curtain, the yard was empty. No one. He unlocked the door, slid it open a few inches, and called out, "Hello?" Silence. The backyard was still, the air cold. The porch light flickered slightly, casting long shadows over the wooden fence. He stepped out onto the concrete patio, scanned left, then right. Nothing, not even a breeze. Then from inside the house, he heard the knocking again. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, it was from the front door. He froze. The front and back doors were on opposite ends of the house. No one could have moved from one to the other in that short time, not without making a sound. Ben ran back inside, locked the sliding door, and crept toward the front window. He peeled the blinds back just enough to see. There was a man standing on the porch. Not moving, not waving, just standing. Ben described him as average height, wearing a long coat and a hood that cast a shadow over his face. His posture was perfectly straight, his hands at his sides. Then came the knock again. Knock, knock, knock. But Ben noticed something terrifying. The man wasn't knocking with his hand. He wasn't even moving. His arms were stiff, still. But the knocking kept coming, loud and sharp, Ben backed away, suddenly aware that something was wrong. Deeply, profoundly wrong. He grabbed his phone to call his parents. No signal. He tried again. Nothing. Even his house's Wi-Fi was down. Then, the knocking started to get faster.
Knock, 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 knock.
It was relentless, aggressive, like something wanted to break through, not just the door, but his sanity. Ben shouted, "I'm calling the police!" The knocking stopped. Dead silence. He slowly returned to the window. The porch was empty. No one there. He turned around, and that's when the power went out. Every light, every hum of the fridge, even the ticking wall clock, gone. Just absolute silence in pitch black. Ben stood frozen in the dark for what felt like hours. Then he heard footsteps upstairs, slow, creaking across the wood floor above him. He wasn't upstairs. No one was. The house was supposed to be empty. Ben bolted. He grabbed his baseball bat from the coat closet and ran outside into the street. He didn't stop running until he reached his neighbor's front porch and started banging on the door like a madman. The neighbors let him in, called his parents, and then the police. When they searched the house, there was no sign of forced entry, but something horrifying had been left behind. In Ben's upstairs bedroom, on the mirror, someone had written the word, "Let me in." But it wasn't written with a finger. It looked smeared, like it had been traced with something thicker, something red. They never found out who the man was, or how he moved without sound. But Ben hasn't stayed home alone since. This story came from a woman named Lindsay, a quiet freelance illustrator in her 30s who worked from home and lived alone in a small rental cottage just outside Asheville, North Carolina. She didn't go out much, didn't party, didn't have many visitors. But one night, the piece she loved so much turned into the most horrifying experience of her life. It started subtly. She was working late on a children's book illustration. It was around 1:15 a.m., and the only light in the house came from the glow of her tablet and the little lamp beside her desk. That's when she heard it, a whispering voice, so faint she almost mistook it for wind, except the windows were closed. There was no breeze. She paused her music, sat still, and listened. The voice was coming from above her, from the air vent in the ceiling. It wasn't loud, just a soft, unintelligible murmur, but it was definitely a voice. She got up, grabbed a flashlight, and aimed it at the vent. Nothing, just the slatted metal grill. Thinking it might be the furnace or some weird airflow noise, she brushed it off and sat back down. But then it came again, clearer this time, a man's voice whispering, "I can see you." Lindsay froze. She stood up again, this time trembling, and walked directly beneath the vent. The whisper returned, "Don't look up." Her blood ran cold. She did the exact opposite and looked up immediately, just in time to see something pull back from the slats. Something pale, flesh-colored. She dropped the flashlight. It clattered on the hardwood floor. Her chest tightened with panic. The crawl space above the ceiling was tiny, barely enough room for wiring and ductwork. No one could fit up there. But now she wasn't so sure. Heart pounding, Lindsay ran to the hallway closet and grabbed the broomstick. She came back, reached up, and slammed it against the vent. "Get out of my house!" she screamed. Silence. For a second, it felt like it had worked. But then, from a different vent across the room, she heard, "Wrong room." That's when she lost it. Lindsay ran to the door, but as she reached for the knob, every light in the house flickered off. Complete darkness, except from inside the vent, she saw something glow. 2 faint red eyes. She bolted out the front door barefoot, ran to the neighbor's yard, and called the police with her cell shaking in her hand. They searched the house. Nothing. But when they removed the air vent grill in the ceiling, they found something stuffed inside. Bits of chewed food, strips of fabric. A small toy soldier Lindsay swore she never owned. And worst of all, a piece of paper, yellowed with age. It read in jagged handwriting, "She heard me. Try again later." The landlord insisted no one could live in the crawl space. It wasn't possible. Lindsay moved out the next day. She never worked late again. This story was submitted by a man named Aaron, a 22-year-old college student living off campus in a small duplex just outside Seattle. He had just started living alone for the first time in his life and was still getting used to the silence. It was a Tuesday night, pouring rain outside, the kind of night when even the air feels heavier. Aaron had just gotten out of the shower and was walking around in a towel, brushing his teeth, when he heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in his front door. Not the handle jiggling, not a knock. A key being used. He froze mid-brush. The door creaked open halfway, and a man's voice called out softly, "Hey, you home?" Aaron rushed to the door, confused, heart racing, and slammed it shut before the man could push it further. "Who the hell are you?" Aaron shouted through the wood. No response. He looked through the peephole. A man stood there in a soaked hoodie, jeans caked in mud, and something in his hand that looked like a copy of Aaron's apartment key. His face was pale, expressionless. like someone standing in a trance. "I think you have the wrong place," Aaron called out again, trying to keep his voice calm. Still no response. The man slowly turned and walked away down the hallway. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Instead of heading for the exit, he walked to the duplex next door, Aaron's attached neighbor's unit, and used the same key to go inside. Aaron stood frozen for several seconds. His neighbor had moved out a week ago. The unit had been empty, waiting for a new tenant. The guy had a key to both apartments. Aaron called the police immediately. They arrived within 10 minutes. They knocked on the other door. No answer. Eventually, they entered with the landlord's help. The unit was mostly empty. But in the back bedroom, they found something odd. A sleeping bag on the floor, a duffel bag full of clothes, multiple handwritten pages describing Aaron's daily routine, when he woke up, when he went to class, when he turned off his lights, and a notebook titled "Easiest Way In." It had diagrams of Aaron's apartment, and taped inside the back cover was a copy of Aaron's key. The police believed the man had been watching Aaron for weeks, possibly months, waiting for the right moment. And the most terrifying part, when they reviewed building security footage, they discovered that man had entered Aaron's apartment twice before, while Aaron was gone. One time at night, the other time at 3 hours in the morning. Aaron never heard a thing. He moved back in with his parents that weekend. To this day, he has no idea how the man got a copy of his key, or how long he'd really been watching him. This final story came from a woman named Rachel, a 34-year-old single mother living in a rural area of Oregon with her 8-year-old daughter, Ellie. Rachel had bought an old fixer-upper farmhouse 2 years prior. The place had character, exposed brick walls, creaky floorboards, and a massive oak tree out front. But what sold her on it was the isolation. She wanted peace, space. She didn't know peace would turn into paranoia. It started with little things. Toys Ellie swore she hadn't left out. A step creaking at 2 a.m. when they were both in bed. The attic light left on when Rachel never went up there. But then came the crawlspace. It was a narrow, low tunnel behind a panel in the hallway closet. Dark, dusty, and barely wide enough to fit a grown adult. Rachel had only opened it once during her inspection. It smelled of mildew and rot. One night, while Ellie was asleep and Rachel was doing dishes, she heard a soft scraping sound coming from the hallway. At first, she thought it was the cat, but when she peeked around the corner, the hallway was empty, dead silent. Then she noticed something. The closet door was open, and the crawlspace panel shifted slightly out of place. She stared at it for a full minute, heart pounding, water still running in the sink behind her. Then slowly, the panel moved again. This time not subtle. Something was pushing it from inside. She slammed the closet door shut, jammed a chair against it, and grabbed her phone. The operator told her to stay quiet and go to a locked room. She ran to Ellie's room and locked the door. The 911 dispatcher stayed on the line as she listened, and for the next 6 minutes, she heard movement in the walls. Not rats, not raccoons. Footsteps, slow, crawling. By the time deputies arrived, the crawlspace panel was wide open and empty. But here's what they found inside: a soiled sleeping bag, several half-eaten granola bars, empty water bottles, a cracked iPhone, and a journal. The journal was what made Rachel throw up on the spot. It wasn't just ramblings. It was full of detailed notes about her and her daughter, their schedule, their habits, which rooms they used the most, what time Ellie went to sleep, what time Rachel took a bath, how loud the floor was when Rachel walked barefoot versus in slippers. The last entry was dated the night before. They sleep heavy. The girl talks in her sleep. The mom keeps forgetting to lock the back door. Tomorrow, maybe. Rachel and Ellie moved out that same week and never went back. The police never found the man. The only thing they could determine, he had likely been living inside the walls for over a month.